Morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to 2022. I'm Debbie Esparza, CEO from YWCA Metropolitan Phoenix, and we are kicking off a year where we're really going to take some time to look at the elements of a healthy community. Now, some people call that social determinants of health, but the main point is that there's more than one thing that contributes to the health of a person, their family, and their community. And so every month, we're going to take a different topic. Today, we're going to talk about education opportunities. At the end of the show, I will tell you a little bit about the other upcoming topics. But really, it's an opportunity for us to learn about what's happening in our community. I like to say to shine the light on the good stuff that's happening. And then with this creative conversation, shine a brighter light on where the opportunities are for us to come together and the action we can make as individuals and community. Today, we have an esteemed panel of experts coming from many different aspects of an educational opportunity perspective. Our facilitator is Maria Harper-Marinick. Maria has served the Maricopa Community College District for about 30 years, most recently as its chancellor. She's an Aspen Institute Ascend Fellow. She came here as a Fulbright scholar from the Dominican Republic. She's one of 25, count them, 25 exceptional women leaders who've made a difference in higher education. She's on several prestigious boards, statewide and nationally, but the one I'm going to mention is that she's on the board of the YWCA Metropolitan Phoenix, and we're so pleased to have her on our board. Thank you, Maria, for taking the time today.
Thank you, Debbie.
We also have Paul Luna. Now, Paul is also a nationally recognized leader, not only in education, but also philanthropy and community development. And again, you can begin seeing the theme that none of these things stand alone. They're all connected. And since 2006, Paul served as president and CEO of Helios Education Foundation. And as we'll find out too, he's also a first generation college graduate, which again, I think that's an important perspective for our conversations today. Joining us as well is Jennifer Sanchez. Jennifer is the Arizona Community Affairs Manager at Intel. She oversees Intel's pre-K through 12 education and strategic programs. Those strategic programs in STEAM and social equity. And I'm going to let her tell you about an exciting program called Equity in STEAM that's poised to distribute $50,000 into our community projects very soon. Jennifer is also a first generation college graduate. Also joining us today, Janelle Wood. Janelle is the founder of Black Mothers Forum. She founded that in 2016. So this work is not new to any of the folks on this panel. This has been a lifetime of work. This group, Black Mothers Forum, strives to dismantle systemic racism and ultimately create a safer, more inclusive environment for children and their families. Again, esteemed group of individuals with us today. I'm going to turn it over to Maria and let the conversation begin. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Debbie, to you and everyone in your team for what you do, the work that YWCA does in our community, which is critical. And I am a proud member of the board because, like you, I believe in the mission of eliminating racism and empowering women. And that's the lens that we're going to use as we speak about education today. All of us know the importance of education. All of those on the panel, like me, you had the calling and you said yes to that calling of devoting your lives to service and specifically to education. we know the importance of having an education, how it matters to the community. It impacts social and economic mobility. It impacts health, civic engagement. There's so many things that we know are beneficial to our communities when we allowed equal, equitable access to opportunities through education. And so I thank all of the panelists for being here. I will say a little bit more about myself. I've been in higher education, that's my lens, for over 40 years now. And I was proud to be part of the Maricopa Community Colleges until I retired close to 2 years ago. So I am thrilled that I'm with you today. I know that this is going to be an impactful conversation. And I would like to start by bringing a bit of humanity to who we are. We heard the official lines from our bios, and I would like to hear from each of you a little more about who you are as a person, the impact that education had on your lives, and anything that you want to share. Could have been the value of having a mentor, or the challenges that you faced, and the opportunities that came from your commitment to yourselves and to your growth as people. So let's bring what I usually call the stories behind the faces, because I believe it helps people hold assumptions and suspend the biases that they may have when they see someone or hear someone without understanding the story behind the face. So let's bring that humanity forward. And Paul, I want to start with you, if you could, please.
Please. Well, thank you. Thank you, Maria. As always, it's a pleasure to serve on a panel with you, and as well with Janelle and Jennifer. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I thank you for the opportunity. I also want to thank Debbie and the YWCA of Metropolitan Phoenix for your leadership and great work, and for hosting these types of conversations that I think are really relevant and important in this day and age, in this time, and really honing in on the issues that matter most in our community to create the type of community we want for every single individual to have the opportunity to be successful. Because at the end of the day, I think that's what this is all about. It's about, as Maria said, equal access to opportunities through education and throughout our community work. So thank you for what you're doing. Just a little bit about myself. I think what I would share is a couple points. Number one, I'm a very proud native Arizonan. I was born and raised in Miami, Arizona. So I'm one of those copper mining community kids, first generation college student. I think it's fair to say, as a first generation college student, I experienced what would probably resonate in terms of the challenges and the difficulties that you face sometimes being that first generation college student. So my story is not necessarily unique, but it is representative of what we are trying to help address, which is to make access to education success at all levels for every student, trying to make that equitable, to level the playing field, so to speak. My education journey was really influenced by my family, specifically my parents, who were teen parents. So my mom never graduated from high school. My dad graduated, went straight to work at the copper mine in Miami, Arizona. He worked there for 46 years. And he and my mom made it very clear to me and my sister that education was going to be the key to opportunity. They didn't say better. They didn't say, my dad never said, so you can do a better job or have a better job. My dad took great pride in the work that he did as a laborer, as a mason in the smelter of that copper mine. But what my dad would always say is, he goes, I do this work. It's good work. It's honorable work, but it's all I can do because I don't have the educational opportunities to give me other things that I can do. And all he wanted for his children was to give them the opportunity to achieve a post-secondary education so that we would have other opportunities. And he would often say, and if his point to me was, you're going to go to college, you're going to graduate, and if you want to come back and work with me, that's great. But you will then have an opportunity to do something else if you choose to. I was also influenced, and I just want to acknowledge the power of empowered women. It's fair to say, if you grow up and I grew up in a very strong Mexican-American, family-oriented environment, and the power and influence of women is really both through fear and support. I think what has also driven me through my entire life, and Maria knows my wife, I'm still driven by empowered women, of influence in many different ways. And so I had an opportunity to grow up in Miami. I did have the opportunity to attend Stanford University. I earned a civil engineering degree, came back to Arizona, and have been part of this community with my wife and with many other people involved in community work in one form or another for the last 30 years or so, and appreciate the opportunities to be engaged in community work, because I think that's what education allowed me to have. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for all the work that you do. You have been unwavering in your support and outspoken in your championship of public education and education for all in Arizona. So thank you. Thank you for all that you do. Janelle, tell us about yourself.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the YWCA for this invite to be a part of this most prestigious panel. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I've heard good things about you all, so thank you for having me. My story begins with a single mom. My mother was an only child, so she had two daughters, two little people that she had to get through, but she always stressed to us as well that we as Black women had a lot of challenges that we had to face, and the only way that we were going to be able to overcome those was through education. We needed to have knowledge, because knowledge is power and it's key. So I took an early interest in reading. Reading is key. They say leaders are readers and readers are leaders. And I knew that if I was going to lead in anything to change the future of my people, I knew I needed to know how to read. So I really did a lot of reading as a little person. And then I grew up doing a lot of reading in college, in high school, in junior high. And my mother made sure that we were involved in all sorts of community events at the Boys and Girls Club. We were part of that. She made sure that we, volunteered for food lines or whatever we needed to do. We were very much active in our churches. We had to go to church every Sunday and throughout the week. So I was raised in a faith-based household, but also I was raised to not allow someone to tell me no. Mm-hmm. Never to accept no. No was never an option for me. When someone tells me no, that makes me dig in and go, oh, really? So you say I can. Well, let me show you how I can. I don't even need to talk to you about it anymore. I'm just going to show you better than I tell you. So I've learned to just show you better than I tell you. I don't speak too much, but when I do speak, I have already done my research on the whole situation. I've done my research on you because I like to read. And then when I speak, I've already covered everything that you're probably going to tell me no on, so that we can make sure we can move past that. So I've always had this inner thing in me where it's like, no, I don't accept no. There's always a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. And you'll hear about some of the work that we're doing as we talk further. But I think many of the challenges that I faced in Black America is me being fair-skinned. We have issues with our skin color. And as we talk about inclusiveness and the things in equity, we had a lot of that going on in our community because of the things that happened in our past. These things were planted into the minds of our people to separate us, to divide us. And one of the things that I've been very focused on, even as a child, I love unity. I believe that we all should find a common ground, and that we get on that common ground and we work together. And my whole focus has been to be a voice for those without a voice. Because as a little person, I never thought I had somebody out there speaking for me other than my mother. My mother was very vocal. So I learned from an early age that when your mother shows up at school, a couple of things are getting ready to happen. Either you're in trouble, mm-hmm. or somebody at the school in administration is in trouble. But if she had to take time off of her job to come to your school, something is not right. And this is what I learned. I watched her, and I decided that I would do the same for my son. I raised a Black son in Arizona with my husband. I was blessed to have a husband, met him at ASU. I went to ASU. I'm a Sun Devil. I got my degree in economics. So I understand economy. That was one of the things I thought I wanted to do. I wanted to be an economist. Didn't work out that way. God had other plans for me. And I ended up getting a master's in biblical leadership development. Totally opposite of economy, but definitely in line with leadership. One of the things that we got a chance to see is how my Black son was treated. He was treated differently than I was when I went through school. But then him being in school here in Arizona, I had to keep moving him. We moved him from school to school in order for him to be safe. Now, at the time, I didn't realize what was going on, but I do believe it was laying the foundation for our work. And so our whole focus right now has been to end the school to prison pipeline. My focus is to make sure every child, Black, brown, indigenous, whatever race or ethnicity or gender or color, whatever, you should all have a chance to have a good quality education, and no one should be blocked from that just because of what they look like. So that's my passion. You'll hear more about it as we go on. So thank you.
Thank you. I think we have the theme going with the strong mothers. That's what we say in my family too. You know, we are strong women. We don't break. But you don't want to test my mother's will either. So thank you. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for sharing a little bit about the work that you have done and the reasons why you are so passionate about doing the work. And as you said, we'll get a little deeper into that as we move along. But I'm going to Jen, and want to hear your story too. We can't hear you, Jen.
I'm unmuting myself.
There we go. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Thank you for having me. Thanks, YWCA. I'm excited to be here, share a little bit about my story. I am actually born and raised in El Paso, Texas. I identify as Chicana. My pronouns are she, ella. And I identify as cisgender. I grew up in what we know now an At Hope zip code. And it's taken many decades to be proud of my, what I grew up, what many people will say even now to this day with the terminology that gives me chills, like at risk and underprivileged. But I am a product of an amazing, resilient community that includes people who were incarcerated, people that had mental and drug issues. And what I now can look back and understand how I've been able to be so resilient in different industries in my career is based in, experience that I had as a kid. So in El Paso, standing with my mother, I was the eldest of four. My mom was, she had me her senior year of high school. And so I actually attended her last year of high school with her. But I was always there to help my mom with my brothers and sisters as the eldest, and that included standing in line for WIC, and so when I think about things I've had to wait in line for, things that, again, I love Janelle, we're on the same page as tell me no, tell me that I don't deserve something because I know that I do. And I feel that those experiences, like standing 4 hours in line for free cheese, it made me realize how much harder I had to work. From a very young age, I was helping my mom with food stamps. This is before the debit card and actually having paper and doing the budget that we would have groceries for the rest of the month. And, my mom and dad always talked about how important my education was, because I know that they felt that even though they were both high school graduates, the experiences of having to work a manual job My dad was a mechanic. My mom worked in a store. They wanted more for us. I also had an experience of having Black women teachers. So since I'm from El Paso, we have the Army station there. And so I grew up with very strong Black women. And so by the time I was in 3rd grade watching Oprah every day after school, I was like, I want to be like these women. These were my role models. And when I got to high school, you know, most of us can tell you about the one teacher that changed our life. Me, that was Mr. Keach, who I still remain in contact with, but that's how, you know, he didn't let me give up on my dreams of becoming a journalist. So that's a little bit of background, Maria, and happy to insert some more stories throughout the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. You said something important, which is the power of language and the words that we choose to use, and avoiding labels. You mentioned at risk, underserved, underprivileged. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we have traditionally used to describe groups of people that I think as part of the work that needs to happen moving forward and about part of the equity work is being very mindful of the language that we use and the terms that we choose to label people and put people in boxes, which is one way to be divisive, Janelle, not to bring unity to our community. So I'm going to move to the next question. Going to blend 2 questions. So why now? Why is this conversation so critical today, so critical as the YWCA begins the new year, celebrating 100 years actually of doing the work? Because as Debbie said earlier, none of this is new. Some of us, I've been in the business over 40 years, and I know that all of you have been engaged for many, many decades. So why do you think this conversation, as the first conversation for the YWCA New Year, is so critical? And why do you think there are still barriers to equitable access to quality education in our state? Paul, I'm coming back to you.
So thank you, Maria. Why now? And why is it important today? And I would begin by saying that, you know, that why now is because the time is now. There is no time to wait. We have, I would say, the issues that we talk about when we begin to really hone in on, you know, eliminating equity gaps in education or equity gaps in all aspects of society. When we think about issues of racism and how does that create institutional racism in so many of our community activities, whether, you know, education, healthcare, prison systems, right? There is institutional racism. It's been there for decades. So why now is because we don't have any more time to wait. We have already wasted all the time that we should have been focused to eliminating and addressing these issues. In terms of the future, is, you know, and I think again, I run Helios Education Foundation. We focus and we see the lens through education. And we feel very strongly that eliminating the educational equity gaps for students of color is really simply the economic imperative for the state of Arizona. The reality is our state, our nation, our world does not have a bright future if we're not educating every student. And on top of that, and back to why now, is that demographics is our destiny. And when you look at the K-12 education system in Arizona, the fastest growing population of students are students of color. And students of color already represent a majority of the K-12 pipeline. And it's only going to grow larger as time moves forward. So when you think about the simple fact that says a student of color is 50% less likely to earn a post-secondary education degree of any kind, and a degree in post-secondary education in some way is now necessary in order to have the types of jobs and careers that we need to drive our economy, it becomes very clear. Our future is not bright if we are not addressing these issues and we're not educating all students. So that's why I think it's now. You know, you kind of blended the other issues. So why is that? And what do we need to do? And I would just begin with, first and foremost, is we've got to have open, honest dialogue and conversations like this. We've avoided talking about racism for too long because it's uncomfortable. And I find myself personally, people don't want to address it. And we have to stop sort of avoiding the realities and the key questions. We have to begin to build unity. And I love that term. We have to start building unity in community to address the challenges that we face. You know, the pandemic has shined a spotlight on the inequities in our community, especially in education. I'm of the opinion the pandemic didn't create the issues.
Right.
The pandemic has shined a spotlight on the issues that have always been there. The digital divide in education and low-income communities started decades ago. The pandemic made it real for everybody to see. You cannot avoid it now. What we see the impact of who's being impacted by the pandemic in terms of college going rates. It's kids of color. That's where the decreases are. So again, the pandemic is shining the spotlight on the challenges that we have faced. So I think it begins with a commitment. And I say this often, what do we need in our community? We need leaders who have courage and are willing to stand up and say, we are going to address these issues. We also then need to address the issues of access. If there's one term you talk about what's the problem in education, it probably begins with access. It's students that lack access to high quality early learning opportunities. So our students are not reading at grade level by third grade. And we know through research how important that is. If you're not reading at grade level by third grade, you're not going to begin to learn what you need to learn through reading. Janelle made it very clear, the importance of reading. Well, if you can't read, you can't learn. Our students can't read by third grade. That's almost across the board.
Correct.
The bigger gaps are with students of color. So it's access to high quality early learning opportunity. It's access to rigorous coursework to make sure our students are academically prepared for post-secondary education. It's lack of access to high quality teachers. I think the other term is investment. Our community tends to view, and our leadership tends to view education as an expense. And anybody in business knows and understands that expenses are things you try to manage and cut. Well, education is not an expense. Education is the biggest and most important investment we make in the future of our state and our country. So we have to begin to invest in education in very meaningful ways. We have to invest in teachers. We have to invest in improving education outcomes. We have to, for example, provide what the state of Arizona is one of the, I think, 4 states in the country that doesn't have a comprehensive financial aid system for low-income students. We have to invest in education more meaningfully. And then the last thing goes back to, we have to have a commitment. We have to create a culture that values education in a meaningful way for all students, where some students being successful is no longer acceptable as the norm, as good enough for our state. When every student does not have access and opportunity to achieve a high quality education, we are lacking, and everyone has to have the courage to step up and make a commitment to address those issues.
Thank you, Paul. As always, well said. And you're right. We've had an issue with access for years. And even as access improves, specifically enrollment in post-secondary institutions, the outcome, which is the achievement of credentials and degrees, hasn't changed as dramatically as sometimes the enrollment has, especially for students of color. So access needs to be always paired with the outcomes expected of those institutions. And because you were mentioning some of the key metrics for the state, I want to point out for those listening and for us, the new data report that just this week came out from the Center for the Future of Arizona and Education Forward Arizona, where 5 of the most critical metrics for our state, actually the scores went down. We're doing worse today than we were doing last year and the year before on quality early learning, 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math, high school graduation, and post-high school enrollment. So this is why the conversation is happening today. And this is why the conversation will never end, because as long as we have issues that are keeping some of our people from accessing education and opportunities that come from having an education, then we have a moral responsibility to keep the honest conversations alive. So Jen, coming to you, same question. Why now? And then what do you see from the perspective, in your case, of an employer, Intel? What do you see as some of the barriers in our state? You're muted.
Yes. Some of the barriers in our state. So one of the barriers in our state is across the board, the lack of representation of our professionals of color, our communities of color, in finding solutions for our state, right? And so when we look at our state, where we have over 30%, a third identifying as Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, whatever you want to call it, and we as a community are not at the tables that are initiating the solutions for our state. And so when we look, I would say, going back to Janelle put us on the unity, is the unity discussion is that in our state, how do we bring people together, right? We're having a national conversation about that, but in Arizona, how can we bring people together from both sides of the aisle to do what's best for Arizona? And that would be inclusive of, when we look at education, we have data that shows that our students of color are over 60%, yet teachers of color in the classroom are at 25%. So we see that the retention and recruitment of teachers, specifically teachers in STEAM, there is a major, I like to say, Grand Canyon, because it's not a gap. These are massive discrepancies in representation. When we look at numbers in STEAM, Latinx and Black men and women make up a third of our country's population. Yet when it comes to scientists and engineers, they only make up 11%. And so at Intel, we are developing a program called the Equity and STEAM Initiative, where we are giving away grants, partnering with YWCA to look at our leaders, educators, nonprofit administrators that are working on activities where students are represented in STEAM activities. So identifying gender and culture, race in STEAM, so that students see themselves from a very young age, going back to grade school, how their backgrounds are being brought into the STEAM curriculum, how we're looking at culturally relevant activities in STEAM. Because if we're looking back at these major gaps in gender, in race, and STEAM, the activities from the last 30 years are not inspiring our students. So we have to build new curriculum, culturally relevant curriculum, that students are going to be able to see themselves, that they're going to have a science teacher who looks like them, right? And so that comes in an array of whether it's gender, race, LGBT, that everyone is brought into the table, that students see that they see themselves. So I'll finish there. Pick up later.
Thank you. Yeah, really great points. And I commend you and I commend Intel for years now, trying to inspire young women and men of color to think of science pathways as a possibility for them. In many cases, as we know, they're actually discouraged from pursuing those paths very early in their schooling. So thank you for doing that work. And also thank you for bringing up the issue of representation. And I think, again, part of the shift in the work is for well-intended people to understand that communities don't like the work done for them or done to them. Communities would like the work to be done with them. And to make sure that it's happening with them, you have to have representation. You have to have all of us at the table to find those solutions together from the multiple lenses that we all represent. So thank you for making that important point. And Janelle, coming to you, same question.
So I wanted to build upon what Paul and Jennifer said. I believe as far as access to education, I believe that there is access because and I work with K through 8. They get the little bus, our kids get a bus, and they go to school. I'm just gonna break it down. They go to school. Problems is that they do have access to a classroom and they have access to a teacher. That was pre-COVID. So let me take you there and then I'm gonna bring you to where we're at. So pre-COVID, our children would get on the bus, they go to school, parents would drop them off, they go into the building, they go into a classroom. Problem is they couldn't take advantage of it. So this has been our issue. Our children don't get a chance to take advantage of the access that they have to certain educational opportunities because our children are pushed out at a high rate. And that's due to the fact, and I think Jennifer brought it up and Paul brought it up, that's due to the fact that there's a lack of reflection or reflecting back of people that look like them. There's a lack of understanding of who our children are and where they come from and some of the obstacles that they have to endure to even get into that space. Now that's whether that's physical or virtual. What COVID did, and Paul brought this up, COVID just continued to exacerbate and shine a light on what was already there. The virtual arena was a disaster for many of our families because what the schools didn't take into consideration is that many of our children didn't have access to laptops or to any type of internet. The other issue is that when we did get them internet or a hotspot, they were too embarrassed to show their surrounding because it was virtual. So many of our students didn't have couldn't take advantage of that virtual, even when they got the internet hotspot, they couldn't even be on camera because they had multiple people sitting in that space. And we had multiple children in the same space that only had one laptop between the 4 of them. And so there was extreme trauma caused by what happened during COVID. What we've endeavored to do as Black Mothers Forum through our micro schools is that we wanted to just take away the whole old system of how we do things. The old system, the old public education system, which I love. I'm a product of public education. My son is too. And so if anyone thinks that I'm not for teachers, they're incorrect. I'm very much for our teachers. As a matter of fact, I've been trying to find ways to make our teachers have a more safe and supportive learning environment themselves so that they too can feel comfortable being in the space and do what it is they were called to do, educate and pour into the minds of young people. But what we found is that based on the current system or the system that was in place pre-COVID, which is now being taken apart as a result of the pandemic, that system was created by white males, designed for white males. This is getting ready to get uncomfortable. We have to be ready to go into uncomfortable spaces. And I always tell people, let's get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because if we don't, we can never get past this. I'm tired of having the same conversation. We got to get past this. And so white males created public education for white males. Then they allowed white females to get into public education. And then those of us in color, we were integrated into the system that was already there, that was never designed for us, with us in mind. So let's get clear on that. So what we've tried to do over years is come in and reform it. And we've reformed it and reformed it. And you know that if you take something that's been sculpted for one purpose, and then you try to add some different pieces of molding onto that sculpting, what does it look like? It starts to become a monster. And so we need to say, you know what? Why don't we start afresh? And let's have everybody, like we've all said, unify, bring us all together with our all different perspectives on what we need to develop a human being that is not only socially, emotionally stable, but someone who now can take advantage of all the amazing things that Intel and Helios and all the different organizations, YWCA, has for them. Many of our children suffer from so many mental conditions, so many barriers, they can't even take advantage of what you have for them and what our community wants to give them, because they have to overcome so many mental obstacles, right? So we have got to take some time. And that's why our micro schools, we decided to go with the micro schools. Those are 10 student schools. We decided that we're going to put our children in a smaller setting so that we can have adults that look like them, Black mamas who happen to be educators, which is a blessing. We have some brown mamas that have joined us, which is awesome. My brown mamas are joining us, and I'm looking for my indigenous mamas. I want to bring us all together. Our children need to see us, and they need to feel safe and supported so that they can actually absorb the information that we know they need in order to be successful, in order to be productive human beings, so that they can prepare themselves for a job in STEAM and prepare themselves for a job at Intel or in the financial industry or in the education industry. We're trying to encourage our young people to be educators. That's why we encourage reading. We've had 450 books donated to us from different organizations so that we could make sure our children have a library. Many children don't even have a library, right? So those are things that we can do right now. And that takes the community coming together. I have been working to try to find as many mamas as I can, because we all stated that it was the powerful woman in our life. Am I correct? It was the powerful mamas.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
In our lives that pushed us to be where we're at today. And it's going to take the powerful mamas today to push us to where we need to be tomorrow. And so that's what I'm going to say right now on that part.
Thank you. And Paul, I know they're good fathers too, so thank you.
Yes, Paul, we do have great fathers. My husband is one.
Yeah.
Great father.
Yeah,
Yes.
my husband, I know Paul, and he's a great father. So, but thank you, Janelle, for reminding us that just talking about the issues and talking about the issues coming from a foundation that is perhaps flawed doesn't lead to the change and the reform that we all aspire to. So that's why the conversations need to be courageous. And thank you for pushing us to learn how to be comfortable in the uncomfortable conversations. We have to have those conversations, or we will be having the same conversations over and over and over, and not find the solutions that we know are necessary and critical to our community. But you also took us to a transition to my next question, which is, what can we do about it? I am a person always full of gratitude and hope. And even during very challenging times, I always like to think about, we need to have hope for a better tomorrow. And it begins with us. It begins with taking action, and it begins with taking action today. Perhaps some of the individuals listening will actually give you a call and say, hey, I want to be one of your mamas. You know, I'm ready to do that work. But I would like to hear from Jen and Paul regarding some of the things that you're doing. Jen, you mentioned the initiative that you are supporting and partnering actually with the YWCA on that. So anything else that you would like to share about the work that you personally, or you as part of the Intel community, what you're doing to bring, make a difference in the community and be part of the solutions that we're all talking about?
Yes, Maria. I would say one of the biggest opens and opportunities I see, I talked about how we can bring Arizonians together, and that inclusive of all peoples from all backgrounds. But in a specific case, working on a community grant with a school district in Arizona, We identified, the administrators in our team identified, again, going back to the representation of teachers, teachers of color, specifically in STEAM, and how, for the most part, they don't exist. But I really wanted to challenge this administrators to look at something further. And after a few discussions, we came up with an organization culture. What does that look like? Having an inclusive culture where everybody feels welcome. So not just the students walking into the classroom, but the teachers who might not speak English coming into the classroom, right? So what is the culture, going back to the teachers in this specific school district? They have over 50% students of color, but roughly 85% of their teachers are white. So again, going into like, what are the inclusive culture that we're doing, that we're working on? So eventually we ended up putting some of the funding into building this inclusive culture for the organization, as well as the representation of students of teachers of color. And again, looking at it through the perspective of how can the inclusive white teachers be a catalyst for recruitment, that it doesn't always have to land on the teachers of color to be recruiting, right? And so I've given specific examples as a woman of color, many times the only woman of color in discussions is, there are inclusive circles. So I might be in one meeting with all white men and feel horrible, where I can walk into another meeting with all white women and men and feel completely inclusive, that my voice is being valued. So how do we create more spaces like that? And so I just also want to highlight, when we look at the prison to school pipeline, and in Arizona, where African Americans make up 5% of the population, yet more than 15% of our prison population, we know there is systemic racism in several of these, whether it's the industry or our places of work, and so when I looking at the data around Arizona, we look at all of the everything that has to be changed, policy that has to be influenced and changed, so that we're able to improve our representation of gender and race in STEAM, because so much of it is tied through, right, our pre-K through 12 education.
Correct. Thank you. Very well said. And also a reminder to all of us that sometimes maybe we become the agent for the creation of inclusive environments, that empowered women can't just sit around and wait for an invitation all the time, because that invitation may not come. And I always said, people, if someone gives you a stage and a microphone, you grab it and you say what you need to say, and you be public with your convictions and your belief, because it has to start with one person, and maybe that's us. You know, we don't just wait for other people to give us the permission, especially when we know that the no, Janelle, will follow. So let's be courageous enough to say, part of what we hope to accomplish today is have everyone make a commitment to an action. And maybe that action is, I'm going to be that agent of change in my own circle, because that's where I can begin. Paul, I'm coming to you for any comments on what you personally and Helios are doing to bring solutions to our community.
So thank you. What I would share from a Helios perspective, you know, and in the interest of time, I'm going to hone in on two specific points and two terms. The first one is data. So one of the things that we're trying to do is bring data, meaningful data, to the conversation, so that we're dealing with facts. and understanding where we're at. And this is where we start to also get to the honest truth and the difficult conversations. Our founding chairman, Vince Roig, likes to say, and I know many people say this as well, but it's this idea that says everyone is in fact entitled to their own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. The facts and the data are the facts and the data. And so let's get real about where we are, where we're underperforming, where the improvement needs to be. And so with using data as a means to strategically define how we improve education outcomes, and let's be open, let's be honest. We're not here to point or cast a negative light on anyone. No one's here to disparage teachers. At the same time, we need to do better. We need to do better across the board. So let's use data to understand where we're at so we can track improvement and deliver meaningful results. Secondly, I'm minimizing a bit of the comprehensive work that I know we all do, but the second point really does come down to, it is about partnership and collaboration. No one individual or entity alone is going to drive the improvement and change that we need. And the fact is, and we've been talking a bit about inclusion and voice and making sure that everyone has a seat at the table and an ability to influence that change. And too often it's been, the change has been defined by, one individual or one institution saying, well, we're going to decide or we're going to change that. Well, that doesn't create systemic change. Right. It only happens when there's buy-in and everyone plays a role. And the fact is, everybody needs to play a role to improve the type of community outcomes that we're talking about. A parent, a teacher, a student, administrators, business leaders, elected leaders, you name it, everyone has a role to play if we truly are going to come together and create the type of outcomes, improved outcomes that we want to see with education. So let's start with the data. Let's commit that everybody has a role to play. And then let's start to actually move to action. We just can't sit around and analyze. We analyze the data, we understand what's going on, and then we move to action and we make something happen. I think that's kind of the approach that Helios is taking.
Thank you.
With a sense of urgency as well.
There has to be a sense of urgency. There's no question about it. I could have this conversation with you for another hour because I almost feel like we're just beginning to get to some deep engagement in some critical items, but unfortunately we don't have another hour. We just have a few minutes left. So I would like to ask each of you just one sentence that you want to leave with anyone who is viewing and engaging in this work and listening to our conversation. So one word for me is maintain the hope, maintain the gratitude, and develop the courage to do the things that are necessary in our community. So Jen, I'm coming to you next. Just one phrase you want to leave with our colleagues.
Definitely anybody who's listening, I want to tell you, regardless of where you are, you belong there. Speak up, because you're not just speaking up, you're speaking up for our community and for all of the generations before us that gave us the power that we have. So wherever you are, you belong there.
Thank you. Janelle?
I just have one word, and I think we've all said it: leadership courage. We need people with the courage to be a leader, and we all are. We all can lead in some way. Everyone is a leader in their respective arena. They just need to know it. And so we just need to continue to encourage that with our K through 8th babies. They need to know who they are. And so I really encourage us to speak leadership into our children and give them the mic, like you said, so that they can tell us what they need, because they actually do know what it is they need. So thank you.
Paul?
And I will add, in agreement to what has already been said, I really appreciate all that has already been said, but I'll add on top of that this idea of passion, right? Let's bring a meaningful personal passion to the change we want to see. I think it's fair to say, and folks have said it before, you don't have to be the most articulate person in the world, but if you're speaking from the heart with passion, your message will come across, even if you don't say it perfectly. Passion can move mountains. And so with hope and passion and commitment and courage, we can create the change we want to see for our future and for everyone we want to, and the students and community we want to support.
Thank you, Paul. And the last word is, do not take no for an answer. So I want to thank all of you, not only for taking the time today to be here with us, but thank you for who you are, the kinds of people that you choose to be, the kinds of leaders that you are, and your commitment to our community, to make our community a better place for all people, and to make sure that when we speak about opportunities, that we speak about opportunities, equal opportunities, equitable opportunities for all people in our state, not for some people, not for those people, but for all people in our state. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Debbie, for giving us the opportunity to have this conversation. I'll be there for part 2, and I hope that the rest of you are there for part 2 as well. And Debbie, I'll give it back to you to conclude.
Thank you, Maria and Janelle and Jennifer and Paul. Thank you so much. This was such an important conversation. And you've all indicated too, we want to move this from just talk to the walk of the action and what we can each do in our communities to not only provide additional access, but the ability to take advantage of that access and then move through the process. So thank you so much for setting this up for us. I'm going to say one little thing about education in my family. My mother comes from a family of nine children, and the greatest possession, the greatest joy my grandmother in particular had, because my grandfather died when I was very young, but it was also his greatest joy as well, was across the mantle in their home, there were 9 high school graduation photos. My grandmother and my grandfather were so proud that each of their children graduated from high school. And that was a huge thing to set education as a priority in our family. That, because you couldn't walk into grandma's house without realizing, so that again, those strong women and those family illustrations of how education shows up. YWCA, very grateful for all of your willingness. Again, I love it. We've got to get to the uncomfortableness, because that's going to move. What happens sometimes is we get to the uncomfortableness and then we go, oh, oops, we better go back to being polite. We better go back so that people feel better about this. Until we can have these conversations that move from the polite to the uncomfortable, and then into a space where we're really focusing on understanding each other and the additional elements or lenses, that's what moves us to generative solution. And generative solution is what's going to help us dismantle some of the systemic racism issues we have in our communities. It doesn't stop with education. All year long, we're going to include discussions about economic opportunity, social justice, even the design of how we design our communities and our parks, and who has access to green space and playing outside in a safe space, right? Affordable housing, transportation, community safety, environmental quality, access to care, healthcare, mental care, affordable food. We do the only access to Meals on Wheels in Glendale, feeding seniors, over 122,000 meals a year. And then we're going to keep talking about, really how we bring it all together. So that's kind of a picture of the year. Please tune in for these conversations. They won't always be panels. A lot of times they'll be workshops or blogs or social media blasts. We've got a long list of them coming up for January. I'm not going to tell you about all of them, but you can check our website, ywcaaz.org, and check on our calendar and you will see a lot of them. Coming up, we're going to be announcing those grants. The last little thing that I will share related to those grants, there are other agencies in town that give away $2,500 grants to STEAM and STEM related projects. What's unique about Intel is partnering with us. Our partnership with Intel is that we're also including a leadership cohort for the folks that are running those projects, right? So that they have a community of other folks that are helping us see what are the trends in what's making this work or not work. And so that we can help support more growth. So it's not just a $2,500 transaction. We're really trying to make this work more transformative and more relationship driven so that we can continue to grow these opportunities. So not just the grant, but we're adding a leadership cohort of the educators and nonprofit folks doing these programs so we can build that community. That's moving us to a different place. Again, I want to thank everyone on the panel today. I want to make sure I thank my team for keeping things working in the back of the house there. And I wish to see you all again in January. Check out all of our activities, and then we'll start the conversation again in February related to economic opportunity. Debbie Esparza signing off, YWCA Metropolitan Phoenix. Thank you.